There is so much to learn about how other regions approach embedded finance. And in this episode, we're learning about one of the most promising areas for FinTech, Saudi Arabia. Today I'm speaking with Ali Tabbalat. With EmFlex, Ali and his teams are offering a car financing solution that helps consumers to finance their online car purchase. Ali has a ton of experience building in various fields, such as early wage access and at the intersection of FinTech and medical services. In this podcast, we're speaking about Ali's decision to build a car financing solution in Saudi Arabia, how EmFlex is collaborating with banks and not competing with them, and how he and his teams plan to expand the offering. Welcome to the Embedded Finance Review podcast. My name is Lars Markull. Every 2 weeks, I'm interviewing a builder or shaper of embedded finance. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Embedded Finance Review podcast. My name is Lars Markull. Every 2 weeks, I'm interviewing a builder or shaper of embedded finance. Today, I'm speaking with Ali Tabbalat, who is building an embedded finance product in Saudi Arabia. With EmFlex, Ali and his teams are offering a car financing solution that helps consumers to finance their online car purchase. Previously, Ali built startups in the space of early wage access and at the intersection of fintech and medical services. In this podcast, we're speaking about Ali's decision to build a car financing solution in Saudi Arabia, how EmFlex is collaborating with banks and not competing with them, and how he and his team expand the offering. Let's dive in. Hi, Ali. Welcome to the podcast. First question, how are you doing today, and in what part of the world are you located right now?
Hi, Lars. Pleasure to see you again. I'm basically based in Dubai currently, enjoying the nice weather, I would say. What about you?
As mentioned, we spoke in the pre-chat. I'm in Berlin right now at home, and it snowed last night. So I guess the weather couldn't be any different between me and you. But there is obviously a common denominator, what we're going to talk about today. And obviously the topic is high-level embedded finance, but more specifically focusing on the things you're building, specifically in Saudi Arabia, around consumer car financing in an embedded finance journey. Before we get into that, I'm quite keen to understand how you decided to end up there. And looking at your profile, at the CV, you've done quite a few things in the world of fintech. So quite interesting. How did you get started with fintech? What was the initial motivation to enter the world of financial services?
Awesome. Thank you, Lars. It's again pleasure to be here. So basically, I've started, I would say, my background is in investment banking. So I've done like 7 or 8 years in investment banking. I have an MBA in finance. So your typical, I would say, like investment banking track is to do private equity, money market instruments, buy side and sell side and whatnot. And I guess around the 2013, fintech at the time was just the new thing, I would say, like 12 years ago. And honestly, I knew right away, like, this is going to be the future of finance. At the time, I also been super bored with my corporate sort of career. I was unsatisfied. So the idea I understood fintech at the time is really to solve around inefficiencies in the financial service space. Currently I'm doing EmFlex, but previously I've done 2 fintech startups, also in the lending space. One is called Solfeh, which is a salary advance solution based out of Jordan. And one is the Quiq Claim, which is a supply chain sort of financing solution in the medical space, catering to healthcare providers.
And that's quite interesting, right? Like also when we spoke on the pre-chat, sorry to interrupt you here, that, Solfeh, salary advances, I think you started relatively early. Right now we're seeing this topic also picking up quite a lot in the last couple of years around the world, here in Europe, but also in other parts of the world. Then Quiq Claim, described as well like a payment financing solution for the medical industry. Again, medical industry / fintech is, I would personally consider, also a pretty hot area. So 2 hot areas, so to say, you have been involved and focused on. Did you have any specific background in any of these 2 areas? How did you decide to exactly do those 2 things in a relatively early time frame?
Yeah, even till today, I've done this I think 10 years ago, but still relatively hot. I think the idea is we started Solfeh in particular, at least in Jordan, given the economics of the income averages for people, is basically they don't have a lot of discretionary income from their salaries on a monthly basis. So the idea was we saw there is a massive need for instant sort of access to cash or capital. And this is where we started. We said, if we're able to put this together, then we'll be able to sort of find the jackpot, basically, and grow very quickly. And this is where we started, but obviously in the first few months, the non-performing loans portfolio grew massively, around 22%. And then the idea came to be how we're going to lower down the risk, right? How we're going to lower down the NPLs, basically. And one of the ideas were to really integrate with employers' payroll systems. And eventually, this is what we've done. So basically, Solfeh is basically where you integrate, we integrate directly into employers' payroll systems and basically offer the solution to their employees and do the deductions of their employees' salaries. And that's like lowered the default to almost 2.5-3%, which is fantastic. I mean, given the averages like for default rates from banks and non-bank institutions, I would say Solfeh was more of an integrated financing solution. It's not embedded lending. And the reason is an employee, like those that apply, would actually be routed to our platform to complete the journey. So from a user journey perspective, it's not completely done on the non-financial service platform.
Just to understand a little bit better, when you said you refocused it, let's say, or you started to integrate the employer system as well, from what I understood, in the first step, it was a direct-to-consumer business, more or less, like you were targeting finding consumers probably through the typical challenge. With the integration of the employers, did it also mean you target then employers directly and try to use them as multiplicators to get promoted to the employees, or did you stick with the previous existing direct-to-consumer model?
Yes, exactly. So basically, we shifted the model. It was a B2C directly, and then it became a B2B2C. And basically, we started sort of doing direct BD development with employers, like large size of employers. And then we leveraged the employer's network instead of just going to the end consumer directly, basically.
Okay, that's quite interesting, because I think, as you described it, it's an, let's say, integrated financial services, maybe not the embedded finance one, because obviously there's still the redirect, but this is clearly not purely embedded finance. But when you listen to it and understand it, and specifically the integration of the employer and their systems, maybe if you would have taken it one step further, I guess maybe that's what companies would be doing today, even thinking about like going directly through the HR tools directly, and maybe not even, I mean, obviously also the employer, but not more even through the HR software tools. Then perhaps you're even much closer to an embedded finance journey if the employee can get it directly from there.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, completely. Even like the HR softwares today, ERP systems, they're more sort of, they have the right technologies for API embedding and whatnot, which I think back in the day was not really straightforward integration, right? So we had to work with so many different systems. But given that we tried, like integration would also take a long period of time. But yeah, those were the early signs of the integration, I would say.
Interesting. When was the first time you heard the term embedded finance, or maybe not even the term itself, because the term doesn't matter, but when did you have touching points with like product or potential products that could be considered embedded finance?
Yeah, so I would say it's probably like 2-3 years ago. Honestly, like I would say after the COVID situation, this is why we decided to shut down Solfeh as shareholders. I was working on a number of consultation projects based out of Dubai. Mostly fintechs would be like your average payment consultation, lending business models and whatnot. And then during that time, I tried to learn more about embedded finance, and it really opened up a completely different spectrum of how consumer behavior is shifting, how people are spending more and more time on platforms, regardless of those platforms. Like it could be service platforms, e-commerce platforms, social media platforms, and whatnot. And people just want to consume financial services on non-financial services platforms. In addition to obviously the hype around buy now, pay later, whether internationally or in the region as well, we have a couple of unicorn plays currently in the MENA region as well. But like really looking close into that, it made me realize like this is the sort of the wave 2 of fintech, I would say, in the next few years. And even maybe we started with personal finance to also sort of going to affect all other banking products or verticals in the industry or economy, basically.
And was that also then around the time where you decided to go after car financing? I mean, or the embedded finance product for consumer car financing. Quite interesting. I mean, we spoke a little bit now about your background and what you've seen specifically in fintech and maybe integrated fintech and maybe the first touching points with embedded finance. I'm quite curious when we go back to the point where you made the, let's say, decision to focus on embedded finance, consumer car financing. What was your thinking at that point of time, why this could be an extremely interesting area? Because I guess you would have probably looked at a lot of other areas as well and could have done other things as well. So what was the final decision for that was?
Most of the models I've seen in the market for buy now, pay later, rent now, pay later, remit now, pay later, and whatnot, most of those plays, they're like balance sheet lending. The fintech would raise capital and do the lending on their books, right? If you see the overall direction of where embedded finance is heading, I believe that banks, traditional banks and traditional non-bank financial institutions will join that play. They will get into the embedded finance space, specifically embedded lending. However, today I think the technology is not there. So the idea was really to, instead of just building a fintech that actually raises capital to do the lending itself, why don't we build a solution, the fintech solution, that allows sort of banks and financial institutions to play ball, so to speak. And that's exactly why we chose auto financing. Auto financing is a strategic asset class for banks across the globe, especially in the region. It's a relatively, it's a low risk, I would say, asset class, given that there's a collateral, there is like you can sell, like a bank could sell the car and whatnot. It's a massive also like market in the region. It's a still growing market in the region, and it's one of the areas that you can go to, and banks could be tempted to join, right? And it's one of the sort of, I would say it's a challenging, but it's also worth sort of working around. That you're able to sort of break through with this sort of asset class, you'll be able to sort of do this across different asset classes. Could be like real estate, mortgages, or like supply chain financing or other sort of plays, right? High ticket items. So the idea is really to build a solution that allows the existing incumbents to come into the space. And then I think auto financing is one of those. And it's an interesting space. I mean, in the like in Saudi in particular, it's around $10 billion US sort of market, growing at 12% compound annual growth rate. It represents almost 50% of the total car sales in the region. So yeah, so we believe it.
Understood. There are a couple of points, specifically maybe the banks and also the market of Saudi Arabia, that you mentioned that you want to go a little bit deeper. But before doing that, I think it would be quite helpful for myself and also for the listeners to understand a little bit better how does this product of embedded finance, car financing, actually work. So maybe you can like walk us through, let's say, you yourself or myself wanting to buy a car in Saudi Arabia. How maybe would people do it today if they want to finance it, and how can they do it with EmFlex?
Awesome. So usually when you, like today, if you want to go buy a car in Saudi, either you go to, like, let's say an e-commerce platforms that sells cars, or you just go to one of the showrooms on the ground, right? And let's assume that you like a car and you want to buy that car, and only once you get to that point is basically where let's say the sales manager would tell you, okay, you want to apply for financing, right? And at this point, you don't know who's going to accept your application. You have like 40 financial institutions. You don't know which one is going to offer you the best rate. How long it's going to take? Usually it takes 7 business days to close any car financing deal. And that's an awfully like long period of time, right? So in of itself, the financing is coming after the car purchase. However, one of the premises, I would say, of embedded financing is to make financing a natural extension of the customer journey, right? From the get-go. And that actually necessitates, and this is how we're building like our like user journey, is supposedly you go into let's say an e-commerce marketplace. You get to, first of all, link your open banking, and based on the results, we sort of be able to understand your credit risk and credit sort of exposure, and we will route you to the right financial institutions, and we'll get you a number of financial offers, like up to 3 financial offers, specifically tailored to you. And this happens in 2 minutes, right? And at this stage, basically, you have a pre-approved loan from one of the financial institutions, and the financing terms gets embedded into the e-commerce platform. So basically, as you start shopping and you continue shopping for the car, you also see like what is the down payment, what is the like monthly installment, and what is the rate and whatnot. And that I mean, that's the essence of what we're trying to get across, right? To make sure that the customer actually sees those like parameters as they choose the car color or the car, let's say, options and whatnot.
So from what I understood is, also the way you do it. I mean, obviously, I guess in the, let's say, traditional world where you kind of, I know you're on your e-commerce platform and then you kind of choose a car, you probably the process for applying for financing is probably rather, I don't know, painful, but not very nice experience, because you have to go to another platform. First, you have to find a platform or have to find a financing provider, enter all the details, go through all of them. I'm not sure how it works in Saudi Arabia, but might be also some kind of like, I don't know, paper documents, PDF documents, upload, these kind of things involved. So quite cumbersome. So I would assume from your experience, that's only being done when the consumer is more or less decided that they want to try to buy a certain car. From what I'm hearing now about the EmFlex solution, or generally embedding a financing solution in this user journey, people can start this a lot earlier and probably also get a lot earlier feedback what they are able to buy, like in the way of like what range of price would a bank be able to offer them an attractive financing. And they can already, in this selection process of the car, already know, okay, I've been like pre-approved for that much amount, so potentially I have to either maybe look for a little bit cheaper or more, or I can even look for a little bit more expensive car based on this early feedback I've received. And that way make the financing part a lot earlier in the journey, also gives more flexibility and for the buyer.
Exactly, 100%. To your point, yeah, it was a like cumbersome sort of experience. Most of it is just manual documentation, and I mean, one of the like main challenges is that they're not getting like they don't really understand who's going to offer them the best rate. So that's one, and then not being able to link the financing terms to the final like purchase decision. Yeah, and also like if you look like this also sort of permeates into so many different industries in the region. I would say even in the real estate, equipment leasing, also one of the things that we're also seeing, sort of not like buy now pay later, but not your average ticket of buy now pay later, more of a more expensive sort of tickets. Yeah.
Makes sense. And then coming back to what you said before, I think from how you described it with the role of incumbent banks, potentially a very interesting area for them to come in, which the way you used it sounded like today you are not collaborating with banks. So quite interesting how, I mean, maybe you can also tell a little bit like on what stage EmFlex is, understand a little bit like how are you doing it today in the early phases? And is there, I mean, it sounded like there's a plan at one point to collab with banks, but quite interesting to understand that path a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, like if you asked me a few years ago if I would do the same play, I think it would be difficult to sort of say yes. But one of the good things that happened in the past few years in the region is basically the introduction of the open banking frameworks. And I know those frameworks have been like in Europe and the US for quite some years now. As you know, like the region is a bit sort of catching up with those frameworks in particular. But that sort of like improved the awareness, I would say, for financial institutions, especially like traditional incumbents and whatnot. And now they're starting to build APIs and expose them to third parties. And I would say 100% of our ability to have a very efficient user experience and journey is for the banks to have like APIs that we can integrate into, so we can like work with them on that like loan approval workflow, right? So currently the space in Saudi, I would say like it's a fragmented sort of in terms of maturity, like infrastructure maturity. So you have almost 10, 11 banks that do like auto leasing, and maybe 4 or 5 they have already like the capabilities to integrate with third-party applications, such as ours, and those basically are in the pipeline that we're integrating with. The others is basically we're just building a relationship, sending them the application. But in that sense, it's taking a little bit longer time when it comes to the customer actually receiving the loan and driving away with the car. So basically,
But that means today already, I mean, quite interesting to understand also the situation around open banking. But if I would from my perspective, I would split the two things. Like one is like open banking. From my understanding is, I want to buy a car. I bank with Bank A. So obviously, when I search for my car, I need to connect via open banking my Bank A, and hopefully it's supported. So I connect. Let's say in that case it is. I connect my bank. I get like pre-approved, and now I want to finance a car. Would this in this scenario mean I definitely have to get a loan from bank A, or can I also take a loan from like bank B or C? That's like the first question. And that means even today you don't have any, like say you didn't raise a debt fund and you provide financing for consumers that you finance directly. They will always get at the end of it directed to a bank, ideally to the more digital ones which provide a better user experience, but potentially also to those who don't have the digital experience yet.
Yes, I mean, regarding question one, definitely. So basically, we're working with all banks, whether we have like API integrations or not. Some
Mm-hmm.
banks we have it still offline. Some of them, no, we have like API integrations, and
Mm-hmm.
basically they up until today, the easier approach is to do the open banking. You can integrate the open
Mm-hmm.
banking, but you still can sort of upload manual paperwork, which
Mm-hmm.
we have it there, but just for the sake of how it's been done for the past, I don't know, 100 years, and now we're figuring out something else, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, but yeah, I mean, so open banking is there across the board, right? It's just
Okay.
like not all banks have APIs that are exposing to third party outside of open banking, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
issue. But yeah, I mean, in terms of financing, currently we're not doing any financing, and I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, what we want to do is we don't want to manage the loan book per se, and not really reinvent the wheel for banks and financial institutions.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of fintech companies come in and they would try to reinvent how banks manage risk, and I think this is
Mm-hmm.
this is a problem because banks, this is what they're good at. They don't want
Mm-hmm.
anybody to come and tell them you need to be, I mean, have a looser, let's say, risk measures and whatnot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But essentially, we're talking to banks and we're telling them, listen, we're just giving you the technology that allows you to get
Mm-hmm.
the leads that you want to finance, lower your
Mm-hmm.
cost of customer acquisition, and just complete the cycle in a much faster approach, right?
And what's currently, how would you say, how is your relationship with the local banks? I mean, are they, when you entered the market, was it like relatively easy, so to say, to in quotation mark easy, to talk to them and get them on board for some of these things, or were they hesitant? Did they see you maybe even though you're not a competitor, but were they afraid that you might, I don't know, become a competitor? What was their mindset, or how generally the banks in Saudi Arabia are thinking about the embedded finance development?
Yeah, I mean it's a love-hate relationship, so to speak.
Yeah.
First, when we approach them, it's a bit sort of you need to break through that what exactly what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing. But our pitch is always we're a complementary solution to what you're doing versus we're trying to take business away from you. It's the idea is really the opposite of that, and basically we're here to collaborate. We're here to help you get more leads and more business going on.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, discussions usually banks usually have very long sales cycles, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it could take up to 6 to 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, we're keeping that discussion open, and there is basically a number of institutions we're trying to integrate with during that time. Um, but yeah, I mean, generally speaking, banks need to understand like if you're competing with them or you're just complementing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Some of the challenges we're having with banks, for example, is banks they don't want to be intermediated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we're building the technology in a way that basically we're not managing your customers anyway. In any way, we're not analyzing their data. We're not storing any sort of data. We're not intermediating that. I
Mm-hmm.
have APIs you can consume. You get the leads, and you'd have your own workflow, and then you finance them. And I tend to find that this is the best approach when you talk to
Mm-hmm.
incumbents that been like, I mean, even historically they've been standalone, let's say, uh, businesses that like never like have integrated or like been very sort of experienced in that sort of ecosystem driven sort of strategy, right? Where you have to do
Mm-hmm.
embed with third parties and whatnot, and then you have to take operational risks, and then you have to do like data sharing and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, just to simplify it as much as possible and to be able to build that integration in a way that keeps the bank in control of the overall, I would say, journey.
I mean, like from the way you describe it, from an outsider perspective, obviously the first word that comes to my mind, in a way, you are an enabler for the banks to participate in a new technology development to basically provide their financing directly in these platforms, right? I mean, I guess If you were not on the space, then the only choice is like maybe for them to have the technical integration with these platforms. And obviously, in a way, depending on the number of car financing financial institutions available in the country, probably doesn't really make sense if you go one by one. So like a company in the middle who basically does that is quite interesting. But then like to extend my previous question a little bit more, from what we heard in your introduction, I think one of your first business is in Jordan. So maybe, I guess you are maybe from Jordan. You said right now you're in Dubai, but you're building the business in Saudi Arabia. So quite interesting to understand like what made the choice for like doing this business in Saudi Arabia versus maybe the other two countries where you spent some time before.
That's a fantastic question. So basically, if you look at the region where I come from, basically you have like the two biggest markets in the region are basically Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And then you have, let's say, Jordan, which is smaller piece, and then you have the UAE as well. It's also a little bit big, but it's not as big as Saudi and Jordan, I would say. The reason we chose Saudi in particular, not only because it's a massive market for like in general in the region, but also like it has a massive like auto market as well. Almost 50% of the cars sold across the region comes from Saudi. Also, one of the challenging aspect in that is basically in the region you have like let's say 7 or 8 countries, and for every market they have their own regulatory authority, right? So it would be very difficult to start somewhere and just roll out the product. You need to be in a one market, dominate that market, and hopefully get to other markets later. Plus that SAMA, which is the central bank in Saudi, is basically being very active. They have their own sandbox. They have frameworks around, obviously, open banking. They've been there for a few years now, and they're working on open finance and open economy sort of frameworks as well. So it's very conducive of building, I would say, and it's a massive market overall. Like there's a lot of like capital inflows to the market, so we believe it's the right place to be.
Do you feel like, I mean, I've never been involved in any project in Saudi Arabia, but looking, let's say, my LinkedIn timeline and following certain people, I think specifically in the last year or two, I've seen a lot more activities from people in Saudi Arabia. Do you feel like, I'm not sure, like when you started with EmFlex, do you feel like this has like, is it just like my perspective, or do you also see that there's been a lot more activities most recently? Is that perhaps also aligned with the regulators, Sama, you mentioned, like being more open, more active, more supportive, maybe starting some of the initiatives? What's your point of view on that?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, in Saudi, there is what they call the 2030 vision, which comes from the higher ups in the government, and sort of trickles like throughout the country. And one of them is the regulator, which is the central bank in this case. But what this vision actually holds is basically they want to revive all like economies in the space, and that actually caused a massive influx of investments in Saudi, in Riyadh, and you have like NEOM in different parts of Saudi. You have like a lot of investment. You have Formula One coming in, a lot of fintechs. They've recently, like last week, they've announced also for the auto financing space, like a mega park for production, hybrid vehicles, and supply chain for that space. So a lot of it is just coming from that, right? So there is this hype. I think it's real, and we're trying to ride the wave. I would say contribute as much, and plus probably one of the like the largest fintech in the region actually comes from Saudi. It's called Tabi, buy now pay later solution, by the way. And yesterday they've closed 160 million valued at $3.3 billion. So
there's kind of a validation for the previous development as well.
Yeah.
I also want to come to, like, I think you mentioned it when we started talking about EmFlex, that obviously right now you're doing auto financing for consumers. But I think you also mentioned that obviously this model can be also potentially extended to other product groups. So thinking, like, or to asking around that is like, how focused are you? I mean, the car financing, the auto financing, as you described, it sounds like the perfect like entry, but maybe it's a question too early to ask. But if I'm still gonna ask it, would you, if you have cracked that market, so to say, completely in Saudi Arabia, what do you think? Would you rather take this car financing, auto financing to other countries, or rather look for other, let's say, objects, collaterals to finance in Saudi Arabia? Like, what is your planning currently or thinking around these things? I mean, maybe you don't have a final answer, but what's going on in your head when you're hearing this question?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question because we always debate sort of what would be the right answer to that.
Yeah.
So I don't
Luckily,
necessarily have the right.
you you don't have to make the decision right now, but at
Yeah,
least you
yeah,
can start thinking about it, right?
yeah, obviously, but yeah, we always like try to think around what is the right approach.
Yeah.
But honestly, like if you look at it, I mean, like for example, a similar solution to EmFlex would be like AutoFi in the US, right, where they
Mm-hmm.
focus exclusively into the, let's say, user experience journey in the auto space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this also sort of they got into the ERP systems of, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
dealerships, and they have their own sort of softwares around that, not only the pre-approval part. So that's a very sort of specific piece, which has some leverage around it, right? So if you do this, so sort of
Mm-hmm.
ring fences your solution in the market.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is the other approach where I don't know if you know the company is called Charge After. It's
Mm-hmm.
also sort of so basically they don't like it's not vertical focused, but it's basically more of a horizontal play, right?
Mm-hmm.
They do omni-channel, different banking products, and they only just do the embedding on the surface, I would say, with either ERP systems or e-commerce platforms across different products. I mean, we're still too early to decide where to go, but
Yeah.
obviously, I mean, based on market feedback and a lot of the feedback we're getting from financial institutions, e-commerce platforms, dealerships is basically to at least for the first 2 years to 3 years is to stay on the same vertical
Mm-hmm.
and to sort of work around some of those challenges that are already existing in the market. I mean, there's a lot of issues in the space itself. You have challenges around inventory management,
Mm-hmm.
having real-time access to the deals. I mean, there are all sorts of things that still needs to be sort of ironed out. I think the objective is to really focus on solve those solutions and then figure out, commercially speaking, what would be the next best bet after that.
And I guess as a former investment banker or finance guy, we all know the concept of options, and obviously the later you can decide, the better. So obviously, why would you make this decision today when you can spend the next month and years building and learning and seeing where the right opportunity is? Because I guess the
Exactly.
decision would also be heavily be influenced by opportunities that open up around the time, where maybe, I don't know, players from other countries reach out to you, or either other verticals in Saudi Arabia hear what you're building. And again, the way you have built the product, from what I hear, is connecting with existing financial service providers. Might be quite suitable also to take that to other financing opportunities.
Definitely. Definitely.
Great, Ali. We covered a lot of ground. Really, really interesting. Thanks for sharing your insight. I've been involved in embedded finance, car-related activities here in Europe, so quite interested to also learn how it works in other markets and everything around that. If there's a listener out there who wants to get in touch with you, wants maybe pick you up for a more specific discussion, or maybe has an opportunity that he or she wants to discuss with you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Fantastic. First of all, thank you for having me, Lars. It's been a pleasure to be on your podcast, definitely. And in terms of reaching out, I am also available on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
but on my email as well at ali@emflex.co. Like, yeah, fantastic.
People can reach out to you there. And yeah, I'll make sure to follow your journey as well. We said you started with early wage access and to medical fintech applications and now car financing. So it'll be interesting to see where you stand in a couple of years. So maybe we can catch up then and do another recording of an episode and see what you've learned in the meantime.
Definitely, Lars. Thank you so much.
Great, Ali. Until next time. Bye.